Hey you guys, thanks for checking out this video today. I appreciate your time. I'm going to be talking in this video about something a little different than what I would normally talk about. Usually the Bible here is kind of what I like to talk about. And what I'm saying today, does tie into some scripture, but I'm not going to focus on scripture right in this video right now. This is a video that's kind of intended to just inform some people. Anybody watching this right now, I think you have a right to know some of the information that is being filtered out of the interwebs. You got Facebook, Google, YouTube, whatever, various news sources. Lots of things are under a tight control right now, because there are many things I'm going to present to you today that are just not talked about in the mainstream. And that's by design, unfortunately. So I just felt like, when this whole virus pandemic issue started, I just want you to know, I was kind of just like you, just trying to figure it out and try to kind of do what's responsible, do what's good. And I truly did believe that something serious was going on in the world, that this virus was a big deal and that it was killing lots of people, infecting lots of people. I actually was one of the first people at my job to work at home, and it wasn't because they told me to work from home. It's because I wanted to work from home. I thought that was going to be the most responsible thing I could do. I also, was one of the first people wearing gloves at the grocery store before that was ever even advised. I had at the time gathered as much information as I could. When you looked at what was going on in Wuhan, it was a pretty serious deal, and you could also see that if you're reading between the lines at least, that there's a lot of stuff going on in China that we just don't actually know and isn't being accurately reported. So I felt like, wow, there's reason to be cautious here. There's reason to think that this virus is real and that it is hurting a lot of people, and that we need to be responsible and careful and compassionate and considerate. Wear gloves or masks or stay home or whatever. So I just want you to know, that was my initial position on this. And I was even encouraging people at work, hey, stay home if you can. This is serious. We don't want to get people sick. But I have since really modified my position, because I've dug deeper. I've looked harder, rather than just sort of consuming the mainstream narrative that you hear every day. I've kind of gone off the beaten path a bit just to sort of see what else is out there. If there's weird fringy things that don't add up, if it's all conspiracy theory, then I want nothing to do with that stuff. But if there are real facts and you can go find them, and they give you reason to suspect that what you believe through the mainstream is not maybe the whole truth, then I think you got to look at that honestly, and you got to decide what you're going to do with it. For me, I'm still deciding what I'm going to do with it, but this video is part of what I'm going to do. I'm going to share some of the information, and you guys can make your own decisions. You can decide if what I'm presenting is true, and what bearing that has on your decisions and your actions. But this video is not a chance for me to rant or rave about anything, or to tell you what you should do exactly, or to point fingers. I just want to present facts, what I think are facts. And I also am open to being challenged or critiqued or whatever, because I don't want to believe something that isn't true. So if you can find something that would contradict what I'm saying, then by all means, you feel free to share it. So I'm totally open to whatever. Let me flip over to a Google Doc that I've been working on. It has some bullet points and some links to different sources, because I don't really want to make an assertion if I can't support it with something. So that's what I want to walk you through, and I think you might find this interesting, so sort of hang in there. Let me flip over now. Okay, so this is my file, and I'm going to go through some of these points. I don't know if I have time to go through all this stuff, but I will try to go through some of it. So basically, thing number one, the whole world is changing its life and behaviors and everything. All these new precedents are being set every day on the basis of the case count and the death count related to the COVID-19. So if those numbers are not reliable, then that sort of shakes the foundations of all of the policy making that's happening all around the world. And that's a huge thing to realize. It's just, this is impacting the whole world. So we need to know, but especially here in the United States, when we look at our cases and deaths, it's important to realize, and nobody's saying this on MSNBC or CNN or Fox or anywhere, but the CDC admits that the case counts and death counts include both confirmed and probable cases of deaths. So that opens it up to like interpretation. You don't have to actually get tested and verified to be counted. Like, let's have a look at the CDC itself, their website here. I have to say too that this has changed. This site looks a little different than when I saw it like a week or so ago. And the way they've done the wording on here, it has been updated. But it still pretty much admits the same thing. If you look at the asterisks on the total cases and total deaths, they are pointing down here to a note that says that these cases include probable cases and probable deaths in these totals. Now, it's not that many, and this is something that's been added recently. I don't know when, but in the past, they just sort of admitted that we're lumping in probable cases and deaths. They weren't giving hard, fast numbers. But I personally, just based on some of the other research that I'll kind of go through in this video, I personally am suspicious that these numbers are much lower than they ought to be. I suspect there's a lot more probable cases than that being included here. And now that's just my gut feeling. It's hard for me to prove that, and I'm not telling you you have to believe that. But I just want you to kind of have an open mind and have a look at some of this. They do go into a little bit more depth on the probable cases down further on the page, just kind of how they go about like doing that. So you can kind of explore that for yourself. I think they're trying to sort of minimize the impact of this statement. They're trying to make it seem like, you know, they haven't been doing it for very long and they're very careful about it, blah, blah, blah. But to me, you guys, come on, from the start, they're throwing in probable cases, which do inflate the numbers, which does add to the fear mongering that we're seeing everywhere, right? Now we have to rely on these numbers. If all of these lockdowns all around the country are based on these numbers, then they better be accurate, don't you think? So let's move on to another point. This is number 2 on the list. Deborah Birx. Dr. Birx is one of the White House task force members for the coronavirus task force, that she admits in this video, and this video can be hard to find, and it might be taken down because a lot of content I've tracked has been taken down, so then I have to go find it again. But basically, this video, I'll play a little clip. It shows her admitting that the United States is taking a liberal approach to mortality. So meaning if someone dies due to some other issue, but they had COVID, well, then they get counted as a COVID death. Like that's now considered the cause of death, and they get lumped into those numbers. But the person could have died of a heart issue, a kidney issue, or maybe, you know, I have another video too where I can point out that someone on hospice care could be counted. So someone who would have probably died anyways, within weeks anyways, still gets lumped in. But let's have a look at this video for a second.
So I think in this country, we've taken a very liberal approach to mortality. And I think the reporting here has been pretty straightforward over the last 5 to 6 weeks. Prior to that, when there wasn't testing in January and February, that's a very different situation and unknown. There are other countries that if you had a pre-existing condition, and let's say the virus caused you to go to the ICU and then have a heart or kidney problem, some countries are recording that as a heart issue or a kidney issue and not a COVID-19 death. Right now, we're still recording it, and the great thing about having forms that come in and a form that has the ability to mark it as COVID-19 infection, the intent is right now that if someone dies with COVID-19, we are counting that as a COVID-19 death.
Okay, so I'll stop there. So she's admitting that people who have other conditions, like a serious heart condition, but also come in for COVID, they get counted, they get recorded as if COVID is the thing that killed them, which is not like easy to prove at all, and is probably not the case in many of those situations. So that is also going to be part of the inflation of the death numbers. So number one, number one and number two are kind of related points about how these numbers are inflated. Let's go into number three. This is a testimony of an ICU nurse, someone who's been in the field 30 years, she said. And she talks about how COVID deaths are being falsified. She says hospital workers are not allowed to disclose the truth about what's going on because that would be breaking federal law. So there's HIPAA requirements that a lot of these doctors and nurses feel, prevents them from speaking up about what's happening for real in the hospitals. She says hospital policies change every day and healthcare workers are being pressured to just follow orders. She says COVID-19 patients are considered rule out patients right away, which means workers are supposed to treat them, like assume that they have COVID until they find out that they don't have COVID. And then, so I think at that point what she's saying is they get assumed to have COVID and then they get counted as a COVID patient. But then if they later test negative, then they don't go back and fix the numbers. They got lumped in as a COVID case and they don't go back and adjust if they find out later that they aren't positive. So that's interesting video. I'll just go play a clip for you.
We can't disclose this.
And the audio is muffled because, again, this person is concerned about breaking federal law and doesn't want their identity known. So this is something that, yeah, you might say, well, maybe someone made this up. Again, you have to use your own judgment about if you think this is true or not. But it does match up with other things that Deborah Birx herself just said and other evidence that I found as well. So let me just kind of skim through some of this.
On the death certificate only put the main contributing factor. So if someone came in with brain cancer or a bleed or some kind of terminal thing, and then that led eventually to respiratory failure, and that's how they passed away. What gets put on the medical record is totally up to the doctor's discretion. And a lot of times they don't think about it until they're just filling out the certificate. And what people are not getting, which I know from this experience of having patients expire in the hospital a lot, is there is pressure right now in the medical community to, even if that patient has a positive, or if they don't, there are people who are rule out COVIDs right now, which is what the majority of the patients in Utah hospitals are right now. And I haven't followed around the country as much, but rule out COVID, you basically treat the patient as if they have it until you find out that they don't. And that is where the insanity is taking place, where a doctor who is overworked and trying to deal with multiple things at the time, you bring the death certificate of a person and say, hey, what do you want to put down as cause of death? And they have guidelines that they need to follow in that as well. But sometimes I don't think they're doing anything, sinister with it. But I do know that there is a push, and I don't know if it's coming from administration or where it's coming from the World Health Organization, the CDC, I don't know, that if a patient dies, if they are COVID positive, you put COVID as the cause of death. I think that the HIPAA rules are being manipulated, are being used to the advantage of those who want to not disclose information that would actually make people more at ease and go, oh, this person was a brittle diabetic. Oh, they had obese, all these other things. There was a patient who passed away in a nursing home under hospice care, which means you're basically you're dying because they had I don't know how they ended up getting a COVID test. That's bizarre that you would do that on a hospice patient, but that they would get a COVID test positive. That person didn't die of their terminal disease. They died of COVID. This is what is happening.
Okay, I'll stop it there, you guys. You get the gist. And she's basically just saying what Deborah Birx said. So, yeah, but in this case, it's even quite alarming. Like she's talking about a hospice patient who would have died already, and I think that's quite alarming. It seems as though there's some agenda being pushed on these doctors and nurses to inflate these numbers. So I think cause for, you to pause and maybe scratch your head and wonder what's really going on there. I'm not going to say for sure one way or another. You can make your own decision, but let's look at some more evidence here. Illinois health officials admit this point. Remember in the video she talked about the hospice patient? Well, I found this video of an official in the Chicago Health Department admitting to this very practice. Watch this.
For we wrestle not against...
Here we go.
Teenager and first teen...
I have to skip to this part. Here we go.
I wonder.
I know we have had people of all age groups die. I just want to be clear in terms of the definition of people dying of COVID. So the case definition is very simplistic. It means at the time of death, it was a COVID positive diagnosis. So that means that if you were
at the time
in
of
hospice and had already been given, a few weeks to live, and then you also were found to have COVID, that would be counted as a COVID death. It means...
All right, so just for the sake of time, she pretty much just said what that nurse was claiming. And that nurse's video came out before this woman's statement. So I don't know, definitely that seems suspicious to me, why people would be doing that. I don't think, anyways, I understand you'd want to test people who had COVID, but I don't think that somebody in hospice care who even tests positive should be treated as a COVID death to inflate the numbers and give the impression that this is a cause of death that is greater than it really ought to be. The reporting is not accurate, you guys. So let's look at the media for a minute. I've kind of made the case that some of these numbers are just not reliable for various reasons. But now let's look at the media agenda. There's definitely some sort of agenda. And I mean, I don't have to show you all the endless examples of the fear-fomenting news broadcasts, but they're everywhere. So I'll let you, fill in that gap. But I do want to show how, this is common for news clips to news broadcasts all around the country on all these different local places are just reading scripts, you guys. This is kind of funny, but also sad when you see how this works.
When's the last time you've seen a mainstream media outlet do a serious investigative report on the actions of the CIA? There's a reason for that.
This would mean that the CIA could manipulate the news in the United States by channeling it through some foreign country. And we're looking at that very carefully.
Would you say that continues today?
Well, I would think probably for a reporter it would continue today, but because of all of the revelations of the period of the 1970s, it seems to me that a reporter's got to be much more circumspect in doing it now, or he runs the risk of at least being looked at with considerable disfavor by the public. I think you've got to be much more careful about it.
Platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 So that's just to kind of show how we have to use good judgment when we hear all these things on the news. Realize that a lot of it is not private investigative journalists doing their work, doing their jobs. A lot of people are just reading headlines, reading the script, and they don't go off script very often, in my opinion. So we need to just keep that little nugget tucked away in the back of your mind, that when you see a news clip, realize that, again, it's not always some grand conspiracy. It's not like people are trying to lie to you, but people are just doing their jobs. And a lot of people in the media, they just, they think it's their job to just read what's handed to them. So you have to keep an eye on that. Also, MSNBC, here's an anchor talking about how it's their job, it's the media's job to actually control what people think. Okay, let's have a listen to this.
Exactly. That's exactly what I hear. What Yamiche just said is what I hear from all the Trump supporters that I talk to who were Trump voters. and are still Trump supporters, they go, yeah, you guys are going crazy. He's doing, what are you so surprised about? He's doing exactly what he said he's going to do.
Well, and I think that the dangerous, edges here are that he's trying to undermine the media, trying to make up his own facts. And it could be that while unemployment and the economy worsens, he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people think. And that is our job.
Yeah, if you look at the issues.
That is our job, to control what people think. She's concerned about Trump. And I'm not like a Trump supporter. I'm not trying to defend Trump in any way. I'm just saying she's talking about how Trump might be controlling the messaging, but that's really her job, as a news anchor. So that's just revealing, I think. Also, this is interesting. So that was MSNBC. Here's another network, CNN. You've got Chris Cuomo, who's been actually very involved in this virus issue. Apparently, he tested positive for it. He's been doing broadcasts from home in his basement. I can show you that. But I don't really trust him. Like he sort of sounds like he's like this. He's trying to be upfront and honest and a journalist and all that. But I don't trust him because of what he said in one of these video clips here.
Midterm elections to do that. But then she basically kept her options open, and you could really see that because Diane kind of like went through all of these different avenues, and it made it very clear that she's keeping her options open. I mean, in politics, it's best to have options. She's certainly trying to give herself some she didn't have before.
Okay. Brianna Keeler, thank you very much. We'll be talking about this later on in the morning. But just quickly, to your point, I mean, if she does take quite a while longer, what happens to other folks who want a chance to run against her?
Because she's doing what they call in politics freezing pockets. Because the donors are giving her money thinking she's going to run. That means they're not going to have available money for other candidates if she doesn't. And I don't think she's going to give it to them.
She's on her way to deciding.
We'll see.
About deciding.
We couldn't help her any more than we have.
I know.
You know what I mean? She's got just a free ride so far from the media. We're the biggest ones promoting her.
Deciding.
We couldn't help her any more than we have.
I know.
You know what I mean? She's got just a free ride so far from the media. We're the biggest ones promoting her campaigns.
Deciding.
We couldn't help her any more than we have.
Okay, you get it. It's kind of funny but sad, and he's totally admitting here, this was back when Hillary was running for president, that the media, he's saying we the media could not have helped her any more than we already have. They've been promoting her campaign harder than anyone, pretty much. And that to me just shows that, A, obviously we know, or maybe you don't know, but the media is very biased. And in Chris Cuomo in particular, here's him at home doing his broadcasts.
What I lived through last night. And it may happen again tonight. Doctor says it may happen like 5-8 times.
Chris Cuomo.
So that's him at his home. He does broadcasts, and apparently he tells stories of how he's been wrestling through the virus and the symptoms of the virus and things like that. I just don't trust a word he says. I think he's totally discredited himself by talking about how he hasn't been faithful to do his job as an independent journalist and just present facts to people. Instead, he's presenting an agenda to help someone get elected. So again, suspicion there. This one might blow your mind. I actually found a link here's one, the first one that YouTube took down. So YouTube is totally removing content that it doesn't want people to see. But I found another one. Hopefully this link still works. But this is Walter Cronkite, often cited as the most trusted man in America. He's the, obviously led a whole generation of people as a news anchor and influenced public thinking quite a bit, I believe, through all those hours and hours and hours on TV. But this is at the end of his career. He received an award from these globalists, and Hillary Clinton even chimed in and talked about, his contribution. She said, it wasn't the news until Walter Cronkite told us it was the news. And this will shock you what he said at this thing. And now keep in mind that my whole point right now is just that the media, can we trust the media? Does the media have an agenda? Have they always had an agenda? How do we need to keep our minds open to this? Listen to what he said here. He's going to speak specifically, this isn't him, but I'll fast forward. He's going to speak specifically about a global order and what Americans have to do to accommodate that. Listen up.
Europe is to establish of humankind in this
Let me back up here.
First priority
of
humankind in this difficult era
is to establish an effective system of world law that will assure peace with justice among the peoples of all the world. For many years, I did my best to report on the issues of the day with as much fairness as I possibly could, in objective a manner as possible to achieve. Now, however, my circumstances are considerably different. I'm in a position to speak my mind, and by God, I'm going to do it. Through a monumental educational and political effort, a monumental effort, we will achieve a world of peace under a system of law where individual violators of that law are brought to justice. First, we Americans are going to have to yield up some of our sovereignty. That's going to be, to many, a bitter pill. It would take a lot of courage, a lot of faith, a lot of persuasion to them to come along with us on this necessity. Today, we must develop federal structures on a global level.
Okay, you guys, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but you get the gist. And he was saying that as a career, reporter, he was trying to be objective and do his job. But look, you can see how much of an ideology he has. And I just personally don't believe that he completely, that none of his ideological preferences crept into his work. I mean, it's very hard to do as a human being. He's clearly very passionate about this, and what he's saying is that we need global governance and that we need Americans to give up their sovereignty as a nation, and that's a bitter pill, but he says that there needs to be persuasion. So, what better way to persuade people than the news every night? This is also the portion where Hillary Clinton, who was First Lady at the time, chimes in. This is also kind of quite telling.
Good evening and congratulations, Walter, on receiving the World Federalist Association's Global Governance Award. For more than a generation in America, it wasn't the news until Walter Cronkite told us it was the news.
And that's what I wanted to leave you with for that. It wasn't the news until Walter Cronkite told you it was the news. So guys, what are we being told is the news? What are we being told we need to believe and we need to do? And should we trust all of these voices? That's kind of the portion I wanted to talk about with the news. Let's talk about social media for a minute. There's a lot of funny business going on for sure in Google and YouTube, Facebook. But I have one good source that I found to sort of prove what's going on with Facebook at least. But what we need to understand is that social media platforms are being used to sort of be thought police. Basically, they are promoting official and credible sources that they call official, credible, things like the WHO, the CDC, Anthony Fauci, whatever. But then any other content that would go against that is being either removed or demonetized. Accounts are being locked. Subscribers are being automatically unsubscribed from things. I've heard all this kind of stuff, and here's Facebook, CEO Mark Zuckerberg telling CNN in this video of what's actually going on. So basically, I'm going to play a short clip from this so you can get an idea.
Mark, I saw something I think that you're going to do at Facebook.
Just how communicable it is.
It's hard to find
information from health experts 40 million times across our products when people come across something that's false. And the warning labels work. Now, we know that because 95% of the time when someone sees a piece of information that has a fact check on it, they don't go through and consume that information.
So right here, he's talking about how they actually have people who are, what do they call them? Independent fact checkers going through posts and flagging them in the system. If they get flagged as something that's suspicious, that basically doesn't go along with the official narrative from credible sources, quote unquote, then it gets flagged, and that means someone might see it on Facebook, but it'll warn them to be careful about opening it. And he says that the data they've been following shows that it works. People do tend to avoid that content just by seeing those little warning labels. Also, earlier in this video, he talked about how if content is harmful to somebody, then they'll just take it down. They won't even flag it. They'll just outright remove it. So here, maybe I can find that clip real quick.
but still isn't the type of stuff we want to be spreading through our system. And there we work with independent fact checkers.
Let me see.
We'll just take that down.
Take it down.
Faster. That's false and that's dangerous. So, if someone tries to share that, we'll just take that down. That's a new.
Now he's talking about a specific example of like if somebody told you to drink bleach or something. I don't remember his exact example, but then that's dangerous to a human being, so we'll just take it down. But you guys have to realize the way these kinds of things really are going to work. Whatever Facebook decides is dangerous. Whatever content you're posting that could harm another human being could be very loosely interpreted. They are the ones interpreting that, and they are the ones taking content down. So if they decide that someone's writing a post saying, hey, maybe we don't need to, maybe we should go to a protest or something like here in Michigan where, and I'm not advocating protests, all that. I'm just saying for an example, if you were saying, let's do a protest because we don't like what the governor's doing, well, that would be gathering people together, which could actually endanger people's lives because that could spread disease. So like Facebook could just say, that's putting other human lives at risk. We're going to remove that content from Facebook. So you wouldn't be able to communicate through posts or events on Facebook that would encourage that kind of behavior. So they're basically in a position to take that content down completely. And so it's all admitted. That's how they do it. You've also probably seen the banners on Facebook that are like, hey, get the official source of information over here. And they take you to a COVID-19 page where you can learn everything they want you to learn. That's also steering people towards a certain subset of information, while at the same time helping to make it hard for you to get the other side of the story. Just the next thing is this whole situation we're going through, where the government in the United States is abusing its power. I believe that it's unconstitutional at the federal level and even at the state level for people to be denied the right to peaceably assemble. So this is one of our constitutional rights, and you could say the federal government isn't saying people can't get together. They're making guidelines, but the states are the ones saying, the governors are the ones saying this. And here in Michigan, we can't have these gatherings at all. Even small gatherings are like illegal according to her Gretchen Whitmer's executive order. So is that constitutional? Well, no, I don't believe so. And I'm no legal expert, but I do think we need to remember that we do have laws that protect people's rights, and there are no exceptions for emergencies in the Constitution. And the constitutional amendments apply to the states through this principle called the incorporation doctrine. So the first 10 amendments of the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment protecting our right to peaceably assemble, all of that also applies to the states. So if the federal government can't take away that right, well, the state government can't either. So that's important to know. It's important to know that these rights are being violated through these orders. And again, someone who's more of a lawyer or something could come along and say, Scott, you're wrong. You don't understand what you're talking about. But I don't know, just that I'm not trying to get into an argument with anybody, but I just know that the Constitution says we have these rights and there are no exceptions for emergencies. Do you think the founders who wrote the Constitution, you don't think that as much care as they put into writing those documents that they didn't consider the possibility that a government would make an emergency the cause to revoke rights? Do you think that they hadn't considered that possibility? No, I'm sure through the ages, governments have used emergencies, whether they're famines or plagues or droughts or whatever, to grab power. And so that's why there are no exceptions for emergencies, because that's very easy for government to abuse and take advantage of. So I think it's just important to know that it's not constitutional what's going on. Also, it's a sad thing that governments around the world are being heavy-handed with their people and abusing their powers. Here's a few clips, just what's going on. It's not just in the United States, but around the world, what's really going on. Oh man, and I can't even show this to you because look, this is what YouTube's doing all the time. So, a minute ago, I was talking about Facebook taking down content that they don't like. Well, this is YouTube. You guys just saw it right now. They took a video down that I wanted to show you because it contains footage of what's happening in other parts of the world. There's pictures of in India, there's video clips of in India, you've got the police with these sticks and they're going around separating people, forcing social distancing, and literally beating people with rods to get them to separate. So if two guys are riding on a motorcycle, the cops pull you over and start beating one guy so that it's one guy per motorcycle. You guys have to realize in poorer countries, people have to live many people in the same room, and it's very difficult to socially distance from one another. It's not like, here in America, you have a 4-bedroom house or something and you can all spread out, but in there it's like a 1-room shack and you got a whole family or 2 families or whatever all living there. It's very hard. Other countries their governments are trying to force the social distancing where it's just not possible. It's just not easy in slums and stuff like that. So, but then the police run through and there's video footage that I can't show you now, but people are just going through and assaulting, citizens and trying to force them to break up being together. And it's just getting really ugly out there, you guys. And this stuff is not being shown. This stuff is not being talked about. And that is wrong. That is wrong. So I can't show you that clip right now. Here's a clip, though, of a pastor in Mississippi. He's not allowed to even have a drive-in church service. The police said they would issue citations for people who refuse to leave. I might be able to show you a clip if it hasn't been taken down. Let's see. You guys, this has been taken down as well. Yeah, this pastor, he checked with, if you watch the video, he checked with a lawyer to make sure that it was okay, that it would be legal for his church to get together in the parking lot. Everybody stay in their cars. They're properly socially distancing, right? Of course, if you even believe that you have to do all that stuff. But let's say you want to respect, the law and whatever, even if it's an abuse of power, you want to just go along with it. They can't even do that. They can't even get together and stay in their vehicles. The police literally said if the cars decide not to leave, we will issue citations. And you guys, this is totally overreaching. We do have freedom of religion in America, but we may not have it for long. Here's an example of citizen reporters showing how hospitals are not being overrun as reported. In fact, the opposite is true. This video was, hopefully it's still available. Good. So, yeah, here we've heard the stories about New York. There's tons of, chaos. There's, lots of people getting sick, lots of people dying. You need all the ventilators, you need all the beds. You don't want people to, be piling up. But this guy here just kind of wandered around New York and stuff, went to different hospitals, and basically all these hospitals are empty. There's nothing going on here. I think that's very interesting.
The people inside, that's why I didn't go in. Let's see, the doctor with his mask on and everything.
I'm going to just skip through a little bit.
Completely empty. This is police.
The mayor, the governor says a war zone. This is the Brooklyn Hospital Center. And this is what it's like in reality. Up to get thousands and thousands of people. There is no mass chaos out here, contrary to what the mainstream media is telling you.
Here's those tents they had set up. This is what you saw on the news.
At Elmhurst Hospital, lines of people outside wait to get tested. A refrigerated truck has now been brought in here, a makeshift morgue.
Here's the refrigerated truck for the dead people, but no action.
Ambulances have seen a surge in calls, responding to nearly 5,800 Thursday.
All parked ambulances, no patients. Nobody's rushing anywhere.
In fact, we've got a couple of ambulances here waiting to be called into action. Here's some busy, crazy busy guys. Yep, they're on their cell phone, watching Netflix.
And officials say this, unfortunately, is just the beginning, with the crisis expected to last 4 months and the peak of it all still on the horizon. We are live in Elmhurst, Queens this morning. Rena Roy, CBS 2 News.
Rena, thank you.
Nothing, absolutely. Ghosts. That's all they got you afraid of, ghosts. Hello? What? Oh, no problem.
Phyllis and William Mack Pavilion here on 7th Avenue. There's one guy in the waiting room.
So you guys, I mean, I just find it very interesting that if there were so many people getting sick, so many people needing hospital beds, ventilators, everything else, if the curve needs to be flattened so desperately, then why are all these hospitals like ghost towns, you know, and why is the news hyping it up like it's worse than that? So very suspicious to me. This is also interesting. In New York City, there's a field hospital that the Samaritan's Purse, which is a Christian ministry, has put up in Central Park. But the story is that, like, this is like a big deal. Like, we really need the overflow. Like, I'll show you just sort of a mainstream news piece covering that.
The field hospital in the middle of New York's Central Park. It's been set up to care for coronavirus patients. Under these tents, there are 68 beds and 10 respirators, strategically placed just a stone's throw from Mount Sinai, one of the biggest hospitals in Manhattan. Brittany Akinsola is an intensive care nurse. She looks after patients who are in a critical condition.
Normally, whenever I respond in this capacity, it's in another country I've served in.
So that's kind of showing you the hospital. Let's look at this one.
As we go to air tonight, New York is a city under siege from an invisible enemy. The Big Apple is in the grip of a devastating COVID-19 outbreak.
Devastating.
More infected and more dying. A US correspondent.
There was a symbol of what one of the World Park relief aid came into the world. This is it. In the heart of New York City, one of the world's most famous tourist destinations during Hurricane Dorian. They all tell us it is just surreal to be here in Central Park, New York, treating COVID-19 patients. In a matter of about 3 days, they built this hospital.
So there's a lot of footage showing how they're building it, and it's like really like, wow, you know, they must really need all the extra help they can get. But, you know, there's kind of these man on the street camera videos where there's basically nothing going on. This guy here sits around like almost all day, every day, just like taking videos and showing how like it's crickets chirping over there. People are just kind of wandering around, standing around, not doing much of anything. They're doing like landscaping. I don't know what they're shoveling all this mulch around for. It's very odd. You saw that in the other news piece. But basically, this guy also, I think, is riding by that main hospital that you heard. I think the Mount Sinai one. Let me see. So basically, it's pretty empty. So, you know, I don't know which hospital this is that he's looking at, but he's just saying that there's space. He's saying there's space everywhere that you could have set these tents up. But to set them up in Central Park is just to like make the situation look more dramatic. You know, so something here is kind of there to probably manipulate us and make us more scared, more whatever. So, here's another video. Hospitals are not allowed to do any preventative care, even though the hospitals are not overrun as reported. People are probably dying at home of heart attacks and so forth. This is just, I think, a doctor talking about how...
we can't disclose this technically to any...
that same video I mentioned earlier of that nurse, I think she's talking about just how people who really do need treatment for things can't get it because hospitals are going all in on the COVID thing, and they're not able to really supply services to people who really need it for other things. Here's a doctor in New York City treating patients, but he strongly believes that people are being misdiagnosed, and the way that they're treating them is not actually going to help. This is just kind of interesting. Oh, that's been removed for community guidelines being violated. So again, he's a nurse who was talking about how people are being put on ventilators and all that, but it's just not working. In fact, it might be worse, making it worse. So he's just trying to point out how, you know, people are kind of making an assumption that these are the symptoms and these are the treatments and this is what you got to do for people to get them feeling better, and none of it's working. And he's just kind of sounding the alarm a bit. Can't show you that because, again, we're being pretty censored. But now let's get into like what this is really all about. If the media is pushing a narrative, if social media is cracking down on certain things like this, why? Well, that's where we get to Bill Gates. Now, Bill Gates, I know right now you might already be ready to stop me and say, look, I know the news has said there's all these conspiracy theories about Bill Gates and people are trying to like, there are people making death threats on Bill Gates and stuff like that. Look, I'm not trying to be a conspiracy theorist, but I do want to just point out some information you should know. So Bill Gates, why is he showing up on lots of news stations? Why is he being so publicized and outspoken? He's emerged in this crisis as a public figure, and people are really listening to him. But he's not a doctor. He's not a politician. He's not a scientist. He's a billionaire who gives lots of money to lots of research and stuff like that. So he's been given this platform because of that. And he said he also is being given this platform because years ago he did warn about a pandemic like this, how it could happen. Let's take a quick listen to that.
The coronavirus pandemic is upending our lives in ways many people could not have imagined. Work and socializing now mostly confined to home. Schools obviously closed. Most long-term plans canceled. And while some in the federal government seemed caught off guard, this very problem is something some leaders did warn about. One of the world's most accomplished innovators took to a public stage 5 years ago, warning about pandemics. It all sounds quite prescient now to hear Bill Gates' advice then.
If anything kills over 10 million people in the next few decades, it's most likely to be a highly infectious virus rather than a war. We have invested a huge amount in nuclear deterrence, but we've actually invested very little in a system to stop an epidemic.
Okay, I'll stop it there, you guys. You get the idea. Basically, this is the main reason Bill Gates is getting such a platform to talk about vaccines and treatments and what people should do and how countries should reopen. Like, a lot of people are asking him a lot of questions, and he has all these answers pre-made because he's been thinking and talking about epidemics for years. But I'd like to raise the question for you to consider, was Bill Gates just really looking out for everybody's best interests? And was he really just trying to really warn people to be careful, this could be a serious thing that hits someday? And or is he actually predicting something that he knows could be engineered to happen? I'm not saying that the virus is like, a weapon that's been just put onto the people and stuff. But I do think that that a lot of the hype around this virus is on purpose, and I think that he has been investing billions of dollars into many different companies and nonprofit organizations, and he's been influencing policy for years. I think trying to set up a way to basically vaccinate the world. I do think that this comes down to money and power, as most things often do. And he's at the forefront of this, but I think that that's by design. I don't think that he was just like thinking this could happen and I should warn people. I think he's trying to, he knew years in advance that he needed to position himself this way so that he could be the authority figure that gets to say, I told you so, and now you should listen to me now because you didn't listen to me then. So now people are listening, and whatever he's recommending is what a lot of people are going to want to do. But let's take a closer look at what he's up to, because I think there's reasons to be suspicious about his behavior. So let's just be honest, there's a lot of money that can be made if you vaccinate the whole world, right? And especially if you can convince everybody that something's dangerous enough to even force them to get vaccinated, that's a big deal. And a lot of money is flying around, you guys, a lot of money. I believe there appears to be major collusion and conflicts of interest with Bill Gates and the medical professionals that are steering government policies. So let's take a close look at some of this, because this is important. Bill Gates has given millions of dollars to the WHO, and the WHO is the World Health Organization. Bill Gates gives more money to them than most other nations. that give. And he, and the WHO is basically the organization that decided to call this an international pandemic. They're the ones who have been encouraging social distancing and lockdowns across nations, and then those nations, put in their own guidelines, but a lot of it's based on the WHO. But Bill Gates is very much involved with the WHO. I can show you here, for example, you can go to the Gates Foundation. You can do a search on all the grant money that they've given to different organizations. These are all dates of where they've given money to the WHO. Just in 2020, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 major donations. You can open each one of these and they'll tell you how much money they gave and how the money was used. So I'll just open one, for example. Here's one given for the topic of polio, gave WHO $2.7 million, provide technical and management staff, required support for Pakistan, Afghanistan polio hub, whatever. That's just one donation, you guys. Like I said, there's tons of these. 2019, look how many there are, and pages and pages. So lots of money from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is going to the WHO. So you think they're gonna kind of go along with his agenda? Money is what makes these things happen. This is a list here, by the way, at the WHO website where they talk about their partners. You can see the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation right here. So anyways, $10 million, almost $11 million. I think that might just be for the year. I don't know. Obviously, I think they've given more over time. But now let's look at another Bill Gates funding connection, the CDC. The CDC are the ones counting all these numbers and giving us all these recommendations, but the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has pretty much bought and paid for the CDC as well. Here's their donation records. Centers for Disease Control Prevention. Here's one, for example. Let's just have a look. $136,000, not a ton. Let's look at this one in 2016. I'm not sure how that search was set up, but this one's a few $100,000. You get the gist. You can kind of go through these and kind of pick them out and look at them, going way back to I don't know how long. But point is, over the years, they've definitely been granting money, and not just to the U.S. CDC, but also the Chinese CDC. The Chinese CDC is also an important connection. I'll come back to that if I have time at the end. Now let's look at this. I don't know if I spelled this right. Yeah, NIA ID. These guys basically do like AIDS research, I think. And let me see. Guess who's the director of that? Anthony Fauci. So Anthony Fauci, if you're not watching the news, is one of the key figures setting policy. He's on Trump's national task force for coronavirus and all that. But it says he has served as the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease, NIAID, like I said, since 1984. I mean, he's basically directing that, and let's look at the Bill Gates connection to Fauci, Fauci's organization anyway. So you can go search again the grants. You can see last grant 2019 on December 27th. You can open a couple of these up and see a few of these grants because there's a lot. But a few $100,000 there, a couple million there, a few million there. So Anthony Fauci is one of the key voices in the White House trying to tell the world, trying to tell the United States how they ought to handle the response to this virus pandemic. So I think, again, we need to at least observe the facts that there are these connections. And we'll get to in a minute some of the things that Bill Gates is recommending and pushing for. And they're also the same things Fauci has been recommending and pushing for. And it's not just because these people, have the same sort of ideas, but there's this funding connection, and we have to look at that and be honest about that. There's definitely something going on here. Gates has given millions to, also, last point here, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, Malaria. It's also called the Global Fund for short. Why am I bringing this up? Because Deborah Birx is on the board of the Global Fund, and she is also a White House coronavirus task force member. Her and Fauci together have been the main figures pushing policy. So again, go to Gates Foundation. These are facts, people. I'm not just making stuff up, but I'm trying to connect some dots. If you look at the Global Fund, 2019 gift, 2018 gift, another 2018. Let's just check out a few of these. 1.5 million, 18 million, that's a pretty big one. 20 million, that's a pretty big one. So again, Deborah Birx, Tony Fauci, Bill Gates, they're all playing on the same exact team. So let's look at some of the things they're saying. Well, you got Fauci and others. They keep saying that we basically need to expect coronavirus to come back in the fall. And we may even need to expect it to be seasonal. And all those messages just reinforce the idea that vaccines are going to be necessary. Vaccines, not just a vaccine, one-time shot, but I think because this is going to keep coming back around, and they always keep saying like viruses could mutate and you never know what they're going to do next, they're kind of priming the pump for a vaccine agenda. Let's have a look at a couple things Fauci's saying here.
Dr. Anthony Fauci saying that he expects that, like the flu, coronavirus will come back again in the fall, but that...
So we've all heard stuff like this. If you're watching mainstream news, it's no secret. Fauci keeps warning that this stuff could come back to bite us again. Bill Gates also now pushing the idea that we need to widely vaccinate people. And until we do that, we can never go back to normal life. Let's have a listen here.
Even the issue of once you get the case numbers down, there's a lot of dialogue between our foundation experts and the government now, but what does opening up look like? Which activities like schools, have such benefit and can be done in a way that the risk of transmission is very low?
Yeah.
And which activities, like mass gatherings, may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
At all, you guys. So I'm just trying to share this information and connect the dots. You may have heard this very clip on mainstream CBS this morning, but look, I'm just trying to say maybe these are all like really credible professionals and experts and whatever, but you guys don't underestimate the power there is in these billionaires to influence policies, to influence practices. What Bill Gates is recommending is that we will never go back to normal until everyone's widely vaccinated. And before that happens, it's going to be testing. So the first thing to come is testing, mass testing. And you're going to get tested whether you like it or not. You're going to get tested multiple places, multiple times until they have the vaccine. Then, you'll get your vaccine. But then that's not where it ends. Because after you get your vaccine, Bill Gates is also pushing the idea that we need a way to certify people who have been vaccinated, right? Because if you're going to let people go back to work or go back to school, you need to get your vaccine and you need to prove that you've been vaccinated so everyone can just, rest at ease. Not like I'm worried, but, they're worried and they want you to be worried. They totally want you to be worried. So here's a Reddit post that he did. He says here, excuse me, let's see. This is Bill Gates on Reddit, says, the question of which businesses should keep going is tricky. Certain food supply, health system stuff. We still need water, electricity, the internet, supply chains for critical things that need to be maintained. Countries are still figuring it out. Eventually, we'll have some digital certificates, digital certificates to show who has recovered or been tested recently or when we have a vaccine who has received it. So they want the digital certificates for the purpose of showing who's gotten tested, who's been sick, who's recovered, who's positive, who's negative, and then when vaccines come out, who has gotten your vaccine. All these things are coming, you guys, and there's an agenda behind this. That is at least my proposal that you consider. Is this really just what we have to do to protect people? Or is this what we're being told we have to do to protect people? Because there are huge, powerful interests involved in getting everybody tested, everybody certified, everybody ID'd, to get a certificate and to have it digital and to pair it to you requires some sort of form of identification. You're going to have to use technology to map all this together. And trust me, that's in the works. And I'll get to that next. So Bill Gates pushing the vaccines, testing and vaccines, but then pushing the way to certify it. And now what you need to know is Bill Gates is backing a project called ID 2020. He's doing that through Microsoft and through the Gavi Alliance partnerships. So ID 2020, I'll just pull up on a website here, is id2020.org. Basically, it's an alliance trying to get digital identification done for the world. They want everybody in the world to have a digital identity. And ID 2020 is not like, they're not making the IDs, they're not making chips or anything like that. But what they're doing is making standards, basically trying to create a platform that other companies or governments or whatever could hook into to follow the same protocols to enforce, to collect data, enforce the protection of data and the use of data. It's all like a standards program that they're trying to put forward. If you look at the partners here, let me go click on the alliance here. You can see a little bit more. That's them at the UN, you guys. So the UN's involved in this. The WHO is part of the UN, so obviously the UN is heavily involved in promoting this agenda that I think is starting to emerge. I hope you've seen through this video that there seems to be an agenda. At least that's my assertion. Excuse me, I need some water. Well, who do you've got here? You've got Accenture, you've got Gavi Foundation, which Gavi is, if you read the fine print, the Vaccine Alliance. Gavi's mission, if you look close at Gavi, is to vaccinate the world. They want vaccines for everybody in the whole world, period. Whether you believe in vaccines or not, like I personally think that most of these vaccines are probably safe, but some I think are dangerous. Some I think we need to be cautious about. But I personally don't want to live in a world where vaccination has to be forced upon everybody. I don't know how you feel about that, but that's my opinion, is that nobody should tell you what you have to do with your body. I mean, that's just kind of where I draw the line. You've got the Rockefeller Foundation. I'll come back to these guys. This is very key. The Rockefeller Foundation is like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's a way for billionaires to control and push policy. Then you've got Microsoft. You've got IDEO. So Microsoft. So what are all these organizations? These are founding partners. When ID 2020 was started in 2017, all these partners kind of joined on around that same time, 2017, 2018. But basically, these guys all have an interest in creating an ID for the whole world. Everybody in the world has their own ID. It's digital. But all these players are going to bring something unique to the table. I believe Accenture is going to be involved in blockchain. So there will be ways for your records, your certificates, all that to be stored through blockchain. I think Microsoft is going to be involved in storing data in the cloud using their Azure platform. I think they're also probably going to be involved in making chips of different kinds to store biometric data and to connect to the cloud and to store your records and identify who you are. I think that Gavi is tied in because they want to vaccinate the world against everything, and they want to store those records. Like Bill Gates is saying, you need a way to be certified and have that digital certification. Well, Gavi is going to be the partner that makes all that hook into your ID. The IDEO.org, these guys are basically, I think, going to do the marketing. They're a consulting firm that does all sorts of communications, marketing kind of stuff. But they're going to be basically, I think, trying to sell the whole world on why a digital ID is necessary and beneficial. And a lot of it sounds good, and they're very good at making things sound good. But you guys, you're going to lose a lot of your own freedoms when you start letting the government, track you in a global system of identity. So I'm just saying beware of that. Rockefeller Foundation, of course, they are funding stuff like mad and pushing agendas. I'll come back to that. But that's kind of their play. Their place at the table is just bringing the billions to make this stuff happen, I think. And also setting a globalist agenda. I think that they are also not just paying for things, but also trying to help define what this new world paradigm looks like and get people at the national levels to sort of buy in. Anyways, this is important. This ties into what Bill Gates is pushing for. Bill Gates wants mass testing. He wants mass vaccines. He wants mass vaccine and testing certification, and he wants it tied to ID 2020. You know, I'm saying Bill Gates is directly connected to Microsoft and the Gavi Alliance. Obviously, we know his connection to Microsoft. He's no longer on the board. He's no longer running the company either, but he's very involved. And I mean, there's articles you can find that prove he's still very much connected to the company. Also, the Gavi Alliance, he basically started it. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation started the Gavi Alliance. They seeded it with $700 million. This is all online. I don't have it right in front of me. And over the course of time, I think they've given Gavi Alliance like $4 billion or something. So this is a project, a very clear project of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to push vaccines heavily. This is probably a little bit out of order as far as on the list, but there's something just sort of weird I found here that's suspicious. At the Javits Center, which is in New York City, there are all these National Guard troops there. You've probably seen videos of hospital beds being set up in the Javits Center in New York City, and there's all these things are being set up by the National Guard. But you know, it sounds like, yeah, we need the National Guard to help, you know, give an extra hand because we're so overwhelmed, we're so overloaded. But as you saw, there's not like this overwhelming need in some of those other videos. But what's suspicious about this is there's all these soldiers, and right here, the video, the guy on the street captures a video where these soldiers are coming out of the center, and they have a badge on, like this guy is holding his badge. Once he realizes that he's being filmed, it might be actually a different guy, I don't know, but one of these guys realizes they're being filmed, and they grab their badge and they turn it around and tuck it in their coat. It's like they don't want you to see what's on their badge. I'm like, this seems really suspicious, so let's check it out. He's hiding it. Now notice he turns around and he's telling his other friends here they need to hide their badges too. And so they immediately start tucking theirs in their coats.
Excuse me. Excuse me. What does no salute mean?
All right, so that's the end of that. But I don't know if it's in this video or not, but those badges, they say Operation Gotham 2020. It just sounds weird, to be honest. I don't know if I can actually find you a close-up of the badge, but it has a little red cross. It has the little Javits Center logo. It says Operation Gotham 2020. If this was just like related to their work of setting up hospital beds, then fine, but why hide the badges? It doesn't make any sense. I just think, you know, this is kind of dipping into the conspiracy theory waters a little bit, but I just think it's important to make you aware of it. Like, that's kind of weird. That's kind of suspicious. Is there some sort of operation going on that they don't want us to know about? Yeah, you just use your heads about it, you know? Next, Anthony Fauci said, this is very interesting. So, sorry, I'm in the conspiracy theory waters a little bit already, but Anthony Fauci said in 2017 at some speech that there would be a surprise pandemic during the president's term. So he's talking about Trump's term. And again, I had a link to one of these videos. YouTube took it down. I found another link. Let's see if this one has been taken down or if it still works. Looks like it works, but
I've had the opportunity and the privilege and the pleasure of serving in 5 administrations. I thought I would bring that perspective to the topic today, is the issue of pandemic preparedness. And if there's one message that I want to leave with you today, based on my experience, and you'll see that in a moment, is that there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak. There will be a surprise outbreak. There will be a surprise outbreak.
Okay, you guys get the idea. If I understand if he thinks that there's likely to be some kind of, virus that is on the rise, but he changes subject from existing diseases that we have a burden for already, but then he's sort of talking as if he knows something else, some other kind of disease that we don't know about is going to happen, and that it will be a surprise and that it will break out. So that's just really interesting to me that he predicted that would happen. It kind of seems interesting, like the same way, Bill Gates was basically predicting that the next big problem won't be bombs, it won't be a war, it'll be a pandemic. And it seems to me like these guys may have had some prior knowledge as to what could happen or would happen. And hey, again, I don't want to be a conspiracy theory. I found this information. Anthony Fauci himself said there will be a surprise outbreak within the term of Trump's office. So, hey, I think you should consider that. Let's also talk about Event 201. I don't know if you've heard of this, but Event 201 was a pre-planned pandemic simulation exercise, okay? And it happened on October 18th of last year in New York City, of all places. So New York City had all these different leaders come together. These are key entities, people who we are currently seeing in this COVID pandemic. They were all in this simulation back in last October. You've got United Nations people, you've got US CDC, you've got China CDC. Remember, China CDC was also funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and China is where this whole thing started. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is also represented in this simulation. The Johns Hopkins University also involved, Johnson & Johnson, and other industries. They have different reps from banking, airlines, hotels, shipping. Basically, what they did was they got together and they had this little simulated exercise, but it's so eerily similar to the current pandemic that we're all going through. And it's ironic that it happened right around the same time, right before really that this pandemic broke out in China, just like a month before. So a month or two, I guess, I don't know. Depends on, I don't know the exact date where it first broke out in Wuhan, but around then. So basically, let's watch a couple of videos about this. And this is not like conspiracy theory stuff, so I'm going straight to a video put out by Event 201. Event 201 is not a theory, it's fact. And they are not hiding what they did. It's out in plain sight. They have their own website. I can take you to right here. So they put on this event. They say they had all this roundtable of people. Look who's involved. World Economic Forum, Johns Hopkins, Bill and Melinda Gates. You can watch videos and see what they came up with. Here's a little highlight reel I think is very interesting.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree, unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic.
Okay, so that clip in the beginning, that was a fake, like conjured up, news broadcast. That it sounds very much like the news broadcasts we hear today. They literally planned for a coronavirus. They said it started in pigs, but in our case, we're told that it started in bats. They said that it became a worldwide pandemic. They said that we had to start, cracking down on it. And this lady's kind of talking about the exercise, but then what you see here are some of the people at the table. Hold on, let me see here.
That would be on the order of 500,000 cases.
So here you've got people talking about these cases and the curves going up and everything they're simulating. This is stuff we see on the news all the time. They're talking about the financial markets, what's going to happen.
And it would continue to rise exponentially.
And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together.
So the problems that we're going to face that can only be solved by global governments and businesses all working together. So it's like this, and remember, the WHO is working for the UN, and the UN's goal is globalism, right? So, and remember Walter Cronkite, saying Americans are going to have to give up sovereignty and get in on this, and it might be a bitter pill, but it's for the best, right? So just keep in mind that the people who are planning for this stuff and paying for this stuff, they have their own ideologies, and much of this is driven by the idea of globalism. They don't like different nations having their own sovereignty, their own constitution, their own rights, their own blah, blah, blah. So keep that in mind, and here's their fake GNN news update. Let's have a look.
We have known about caps-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. And sure, there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult. I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic.
So the policy crisis in question for this board in this meeting is this: how should governments, business, and international organizations allocate and distribute pandemic antivirals and medical supplies to the people who need them most?
What we've seen work very well in the HIV field is, in fact, procurement through the Global Fund. So having a centralized mechanism, so financially able to procure on behalf of affected countries would be critical. I think the second thing is...
So advocating the use of the Global Fund, basically have all these nations pool their funds into one big pot and work together rather than each nation kind of handling it on their own, in their own terms, you know what I mean?
It's going to be very important that for the business sector, for manufacturers of antivirals, that we have clarity around what the need is and where the need is and who are making the decisions.
I think that given that the countries most affected are those that are low and middle income countries with unequal access to technology, to finances, the UN has a worldwide footprint, universally recognized, and universal membership.
A global stockpile would certainly help ensure more rational and strategic allocation, but the reality is that we don't have the logistics capability, even within the UN, to bring that together in one place and run it. So this is where I think a collaboration between the international organizations like the World Health Organization and the private sector, which runs these supply chains for many purposes every day, understand where the supplies are, make smart decisions about how to allocate them to the people who need them in the places that need them the most, and then work with the industry to move those supplies from where they are today to where they need to be.
Just to underscore the point.
So they basically want the private sector to produce all the stuff and let the WHO decide how to use it, like what to produce, and then let the private sector produce it. But basically you still got this partnership where the WHO is going to be a scientific authority figure saying, hey, we need all this, we need to spend all our money on vaccines or all our money on tests, and we'll let the private companies figure it out, but we'll fund it, and we'll offer guidance and guidelines and whatever the people need to follow, and we'll set the agenda, if you will.
Point that cooperation among a large portion of it for themselves.
This is the U.S. CDC.
Yes. It is almost unheard of that people are producing product without having a forward commitment for the consumption of that product. So the first thing that needs to be done, because this is not something that the countries currently control, unless countries are going to bring about emergency situations and co-opt an existing supply chain.
I think it's not likely, I agree, that countries are not going to buy a countermeasure to put into a global supply without retaining a large portion of it for themselves.
Another pre-scripted GNN report.
Public health agencies have issued travel advisories, while some countries have banned travel from the worst affected areas. As a result, the travel sector is taking a huge hit. Travel bookings are down 45%, and many flights have been canceled. A ripple effect is racing through the service sector. Governments that rely on travel and tourism as a large part of their economies are being hit particularly hard.
How should national leaders, businesses, and international organizations balance the risk of worsening disease that would be caused by the continued movement of people around the world against the risks of profound economic consequence of travel and trade bans?
If there's some sense that there's a UN institution that can do all of this, then I worry we're suffering from a delusional disorder on the power of the UN. It's really important to get those industries and their trade associations and an efficient leadership established, which is decentralized, but has a collective responsibility and accountability. And that needs to be supported by the public leadership.
What is essential, what is non-essential travel.
So you guys, I want you to just know the gist, and you can look at this more in depth yourselves. I showed you where you can find it. It's the Center for Health Security.org, Event 201. You can just Google Event 201 and find it. But basically, it's very interesting that all these same organizations and figures have already been going through a simulation. It's almost like they did a trial run. And I understand it's a bit of a conspiracy theory to say that they knew this was going to happen and that they were rehearsing for it. But I do think that that's kind of something you need to look at, the possibility of. Another very interesting connection that makes me suspicious that this is a pre-planned event. And again, it all kind of goes back to the United Nations being very much involved in this through the WHO. Is on the same day, this is my next point, on the same day that Event 201 was taking place in New York City, another event was taking place over in Wuhan, China. It's called the World Military Games. And in Wuhan, China, which is where this whole pandemic started, these military games had their opening ceremony the exact same day. And it featured a performance of these Chinese people being a United Nations army and ushering in world peace. It's very crazy. I'm going to show you a clip. It's a very long video clip. If you want to watch the whole ceremony, there's a lot of interesting things in it. But I just want to point out what you'll see is just very interesting on its pro-UN connection to this, the fact that it's happening in China, in Wuhan specifically, and it's also happening at the same time. And you just see all this kind of stuff seem related. At least that might just be dot connecting, and you don't have to go and agree with me, but I think you should take a look at this. Okay, you guys. So that's really weird. I don't know. I don't know if you guys think so, but yeah. So basically, a Chinese army, all United Nations, and happening on the same day as this pretty much UN involvement with the simulation happening over in New York City. So what's the epicenter of the virus pandemic over in China? Well, it's Wuhan. It's right here where these guys are doing their routine. And what's the epicenter in America? Well, it's New York City, where these people happen to be having this staged event. I just think that's kind of suspicious. Okay, you do what you want with that information, but I just think there's some sort of a strange connection. I mean, undoubtedly the UN is the common thread between these things. The next thing, this document here was created 10 years ago by the Rockefeller Foundation. Remember that ID 2020 has a founding partner, the Rockefeller Foundation. They came out with this document 10 years ago, and let me see if I can open it up for you. Basically, it's called Scenarios for the Future of Technology and International Development. International development means globalization, you know. And so if you look down in here, what's interesting is there's a scenario. Again, with scenarios, it's called Lockstep. Now, notice they're kind of coming up with these different narratives, these scenarios where technology would be used in some sort of crisis. So this is just very interesting to me. I'm sharing it with you because I want you to know, like, that, you know, there is a lot of money going around there between private foundations and big government, you know, and you think big government in the United States is bad. There is big government at an international level, and that's the United Nations and all in the World Economic Forum and the World Bank and the World Health Organization, all these entities. You know, and Rockefeller Foundation is definitely funding a lot of stuff, and it's just interesting to get a window and a view into what they were thinking about just 10 years ago. You know, so here's a scenario I'll point out in this document. There's other scenarios where maybe there's a like some sort of a, you know, hack that goes on, or maybe there's an economic depression or whatever. But in this case, this is a world of tighter top-down government control and more authoritarian leadership. I think that's a typo. With limited innovation and growing citizen pushback. So these are different scenarios that they kind of outlined. And if you look in here, when you look at the lockstep thing, it talks about a virus. It talks about a lot of the problems that we're seeing right now. We're talking about China in particular doing a good job of it. Mandatory quarantines for all citizens, things like that, things that we're seeing now. During the pandemic, national leaders around the world flexed their authority and imposed airtight rules and restrictions, from the mandatory wearing of face masks to body temperature checks at the entries to communal spaces like train stations and supermarkets. Even after the pandemic faded, this more authoritarian control and oversight of citizens and their activities stuck and even intensified in order to protect themselves from the spread of increasingly global problems, from pandemics and transnational terrorism to environmental crisis and rising poverty. Leaders around the world took a firmer grip on power. Then they start getting into, you know, safety and stability. You know, citizens willing to give up some of their sovereignty and their privacy in order to get the safety and stability. Citizens more tolerant and even eager for top-down direction and oversight. National leaders having more latitude to impose orders in the ways they see fit. In developed countries, heightened oversight took many forms, like biometric IDs, which I already talked about, and that would be for all citizens. For example, and tighter regulation of key industries whose stability was deemed vital to national interests. That would be food, medication, etc. So you guys, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I just want to point out that 10 years ago, the Rockefeller Foundation was already simulating stuff like this. and now it's being put into play. At least I think. That's my conclusion at this point. You can prove me wrong, but I'll give you one more document that will show what I'm talking about might be true, and that a lot of this might have been pre-planned. This is a recent document from the Rockefeller Foundation. This was put out just this week, okay? It's Saturday now. This came out on Tuesday, I believe, something like that. This is a document where the Rockefeller Foundation is creating an action plan, and it's trying to create a plan to reopen the country, basically, right? Pragmatic steps to reopen our workplaces and communities, okay? Now, again, this was Tuesday, April 21st of this year. So remember, this was 10 years ago, talking about governments flexing their muscles and all that, different restrictions, different things that are deemed national interests that need to be protected and controlled and so forth, top-down authority, all this stuff. Now we see 10 years later, here's their action plan. And how do they want to get it so that we can feel safe enough to go back to work and put our kids back into school and all this stuff? Well, let's zoom in on this a little bit and have a look. See, basically, you know, this is no longer simulation stuff. Now their simulation has come out into an actual plan that they're proposing. Before I even get into the plan, let me just give it a little more background. If I scroll to the bottom, you can see that this isn't just the Rockefeller Foundation coming up with its own, you know, nonsense. It's got all these contributors here. You've got people from Harvard University contributing to this plan. You've got Yale University. You've got Harvard again. Johns Hopkins. Remember, Johns Hopkins was in that simulation that we just saw for Event 201. Event 201 was tied to this, and there was a representative there from Johns Hopkins. You've got Yale again, University of Pennsylvania, University of Chicago, University of Minnesota. Lots of Rockefeller people. Duke University, National Cancer Institute, the New York Times, okay? So again, there's where the media ties into these things. The media has, you know, people with this similar agenda. Let's look at what the actual proposals are. And remember, the Rockefeller Foundation isn't just out there coming up with these ideas as nice suggestions. They have billions of dollars to pump into the system to incentivize this work, to make sure that their proposals are carried out. There's a lot of real power behind all of this. So here's their action plan. It's 3 steps. First, launch a 1-3-30 plan, basically to dramatically expand COVID-19 testing. So that's number 1, dramatically expand it. When you get into the details, they want to basically get it to where we're doing 30 million tests per week in America. That is a lot of tests, you guys. Number 2, they want to launch a COVID community healthcare core for testing and contact tracing. That's big brother for you guys. You know, what they want to do is hire like 100 to 300,000 people. I'm just summarizing what's in this report. You guys can go look it up for yourself. It's easy to find at the Rockefeller Foundation website, okay? But they want to basically hire 100 to 300,000 people and train them how to use technology and basically do follow-ups to contact trace. Contact trace is a polite way of saying tracking people. They want to both use digital means and then analog means. They want to have human beings making calls, paying visits, helping out in the community, just standing around, doing things to enforce guidelines, helping you with, you know, sanitize your grocery cart, answer questions, whatever. But then they also are going to be using technology that tracks you. Did you get tested? Did you get that certified? Did you get your vaccine whenever they have a vaccine? You know, they want to basically create this like healthcare police, if you will. They're not going to probably have power to, like, you know, get you in trouble per se, at least not initially. But they're basically a trained army of people to enforce testing and enforce the agenda of making people believe what they want you to believe about this virus, what it is and what you should do about it. They're trying to get an army of people to carry out their directives. Last thing is create a COVID-19 data commons, and a digital platform. Let me scroll down to that for a second, because this goes, right into what I said earlier. Identification is going to be a big part of this. Let me see. Card. There we go. Look at, they got a nice little picture here of your identity card. That's you, your name, your ID number, your DNA. So that means that's hinting at biometrics. Oh, look, it's got a little globe here. So this is a global thing. They want this data to be stored in a place that's basically accessible to any government in the world. They're trying to pursue globalism. They're trying to even in those Event 201 videos you heard, they're saying, look, there's no way we can do this on our own. Like, we need to all combine funds. We need to all combine our policies. We need public and private combined. We need everything combined. And in order to go to school, or to go back to work at your office, or to be a passenger on an airplane, or to attend a concert, whatever, you're going to need all your boxes checked. And they're going to make sure they're checked, because they're going to tie it to your digital ID. And your digital ID will probably start out as an app on your phone or something like that. But it'll eventually probably go much further, because they don't want you to leave your phone at home. They don't want you to leave your card or whatever at home. They're just going to want to eventually put this ID right into your body somehow, so that you can always have it with you. And it's just going to be more convenient, of course. So you guys, this stuff is coming. This is not science fiction, and this is not conspiracy theory. There is a major push. You can say what you want about the virus, what it is or what it isn't. I'm not really going to push too hard on that. In fact, I'm just going to drop a little seed here for you to go explore yourself if you want, or if you want me to make a separate video on this, maybe I will. But I think that 5G is really related to all this. I'm not saying that 5G, which is the 5th generation of wireless technology being rolled out internationally right now, I'm not saying that that is the cause of every single sickness. I'm not saying that there is no virus. I don't know, you guys. But I think you need to research 5G a little bit more. I did not want to spend this whole video talking about 5G, but I probably could have, because there's a lot to cover there too. But 5G is wireless technology. There's radiation that can be harmful to humans. It's possible that it's causing some of the disease we're seeing, and that disease might be labeled COVID-19, but and could be blamed on a virus. But there's also compelling evidence that perhaps some of the modern technology that is being, rolled out could be sickening people. That's something to consider too. But either way, you guys, I'm not going to be really hard and fast about what this thing is or isn't exactly. But hopefully through this list of points I've laid out, at least it's got you thinking. I hope it's just got some people thinking, hey, maybe maybe I need to question what I'm hearing from the media, from the government, from my neighbor even, just use my own critical thinking and judgment and common sense. Some of these things just need to be factored into your equation as you look at the forest and separate it from the trees. I hope that it's been helpful to you. Like I said, I welcome pushback. If I'm wrong, go ahead and tell me, but do it in a respectful, kind way, please. And I just want to encourage you to look into this stuff for yourself. And I don't know. Hopefully it helps give you something to chew on. And as things continue to roll out, I just want to say, you should mentally prepare yourself for some big changes. What if these people really do have an agenda that they're pushing? Then life as we knew it is probably not coming back. All of us just want to go back to normal, and all of us want it to just be the way it was. But I'm here to say I don't really think that's going to happen. If these people get what they appear to be pushing for, they're going to make sure that you get with their program before they let you back to work or let you back to school. So just be mindful that there is an agenda that's well-funded. Rockefeller, Gates, these guys, and a lot of officials and media people are on board with this same agenda. And I think what we'll see in the coming months and years is forced testing, maybe forced vaccinations and forced digital identities. I think we should expect that more things will, keep coming back. Like these viruses might die down, but then they might resurge in the fall or next year. I would just caution you against hoping that everything quickly goes back to normal, because I don't think it will. And I would caution you against putting all your faith and your hope in these doctors. And let me actually just show you my face while I'm talking here. Don't put your faith and your hope in these experts, these medical experts, these politicians. You guys, that's all part of the plan. They want you to trust them and do what they recommend. They want you to look at them as the saviors in this situation. But you guys, I don't know. I put my faith in the Lord Jesus. I think He is God. He is Lord of Lords and King of Kings, and He is the healer. He is the one I'm putting my faith and my trust in. And I want to be careful. And it doesn't mean because I've presented all this information that I don't think we need to still be careful and considerate of other people's health. I'm not calling for people to start being reckless or throwing off all caution to the wind or whatever. I'm not even sure what all of this is. I'm just sharing some information with you, and I'm saying this is kind of where I think things are coming from, and if they get their agenda, then this is probably where things are going. And I would like you guys to just consider it and not fall for the narrative that you need to give up your personal freedom. You don't need to give up the sovereignty we have as a nation to the globalists. We don't have to let people stick us with vaccines. And along those lines, I also will say, they're not going to stick everybody with a needle. There's so much more research I've done on. They've got these vaccines that are these little patches that don't poke you at all. You just put a little patch on your hand, and it has microneedles. They're called microneedles, and they administer a vaccine that way. You could literally get it home delivered and do it yourself. So no more going into Walgreens or your doctor's office to get your vaccine. Trust me, guys, these guys have invested billions of dollars into trying to vaccinate the world, and they're going to try to do it. And they know to do it, they need to make it fast and cheap and easy. You also look at Amazon. Amazon has got Jeff Bezos on the job. He's trying to figure out how. I read a quote from an article the other day. Jeff Bezos is trying to figure out how to use Amazon and all of its infrastructure to deliver on-demand testing. So that's the next thing. They keep saying the vaccine is like 1.5 years away. Well, maybe it is. I wouldn't be surprised if they brought it to the world sooner. But for now, we don't have one, and I don't want one. But because I don't believe it's going to be necessary personally. That's my personal conviction. Is I don't personally plan on getting any vaccine. When it comes out, I'm not doing it. And if they force me to do it, well, I might have to face some consequences for that. But my body doesn't even belong to me, let alone the government, and nobody's going to force a needle in my arm. At least I'm not going to give in to that, So if I get arrested and forced, that's one thing. But, you guys, I know it maybe sound like I'm talking crazy talk, but the world's already crazy. The world's already gone crazy. And so what I'm saying is not too nutty, I don't think. But, you got to decide what you are comfortable doing. But I personally don't feel anybody has the right to give me a vaccine, even if I don't have to get a shot. I don't want the little patch. I don't want these chemicals going into my body. I don't know what they are, where they're from, and I don't even know what this virus really is. Nobody else seems to know either. So, you guys, I just urge you to use caution, use good judgment, use the brain the Lord gave you, and just question things and evaluate things, factor in all this information, and you might have to work a little harder than just turning on CNN or Fox News or whatever you listen to, because a lot of these media outlets are bought and paid for by a handful of corporations, and a lot of things, as we saw in the video, are just people parroting what they're told to parrot. So be careful, y'all. I love you guys. I'm just trying to help. Ask questions or send me information if you'd like. And I hope it's been useful to you. These are some of the things I think are going on and I think are worthy of sharing. Feel free also just to share it with someone else. I really think you know, we just need to get some more of this information out there because it is being suppressed. How many videos did you see in my one thing that have already been taken down? So you guys, this is real. Things are going to get interesting. Buckle up. Get ready for a bumpy ride. And just remember, the Lord Jesus said, fear not. You know, I put my trust in Jesus. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of what happens. I want to be prepared. I want to, you know, anticipate things and get my ducks in a row if I can. But look, you guys, there's things that are way out of our control. And if you don't have faith in God, if you don't know Jesus, then I feel sorry for you. And if you have questions about that, you want to know Jesus, watch one of my previous videos. If you want to be saved from this wicked generation that we live in, if you want to know God and you want to live for eternity with Him, if you want to put your trust in Him instead of putting your trust in these people, these talking heads on the news or at the press briefings and all this stuff, like, you guys, Jesus has offered you a free gift, so I advise you to consider taking it, you know, and then you don't have to be afraid, and then you don't have to look for a savior from fallen men. None of these men or women in the world are perfect. None of them know everything. None of them can protect you from anything. Even if they promise peace and security and safety, they can't control if there's going to be an earthquake tomorrow or if the markets collapse or whatever. Like, there's so many things they cannot guarantee. They can offer you promises, but they can't deliver on most of these things. So I just urge you to, like, you know, have a critical mind about it, and put your eyes up, look towards heaven, look towards Jesus, look towards God. Don't just look towards people, and don't be afraid of people. So I urge you to look it over, think about whether you should maybe share it with someone else. Let me know if you have thoughts or questions. And I love you guys, and I'll see you later. Have a great day.